Marrying that plain Jane makes me want to puke. But once I get my hands on her daddy's boats, I'll dump her faster than yesterday's catch. That is what I heard my future son-in-law whisper to his buddy at the engagement party. They clinked their beer bottles and laughed like hyenas. My daughter had no clue she was marrying a con artist. I forced a smile, walked back to the deck, and started planning the trap that would leave him with nothing. If you are watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. That July evening, the sun was setting over Rockport Harbor, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the calm water. I had spent 40 years building my charter boat business from a single second-hand vessel into a fleet of 12 boats that tourists and fishing enthusiasts traveled from across the country to experience. The Atlantic Dreamer, my flagship, was docked at the main pier, decorated with white lights and flowers for my daughter's engagement party. I adjusted my collar, feeling out of place in my dress shirt and khakis. I was more comfortable in my worn captain's jacket, but my daughter had insisted this was a formal occasion. The guests mingled on the wooden deck of our waterfront property, sipping champagne and nibbling on lobster appetizers that my wife would have loved to see. She passed away 3 years ago, and not a day went by that I did not feel her absence, especially on nights like this. My daughter looked radiant in her pale blue dress, her blonde hair catching the last rays of sunlight. She had her mother's eyes, bright and trusting, always seeing the best in people. That was what worried me about her choice of husband. I excused myself from a conversation with some old fishing buddies and walked toward the storage shed to grab more ice for the coolers. The path took me past the side of the main building where the restrooms were located. That is when I heard voices coming from around the corner. Male voices, laughing. I stopped. Something in the tone made me pause. I recognized my future son-in-law's voice immediately. That smooth, practiced way of speaking that always felt rehearsed. "Dude, I cannot believe you're actually going through with this," one of his friends said. My son-in-law laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine despite the warm evening air. What choice do I have? Marrying that plain Jane makes me want to puke. Have you seen how she follows me around like a lost puppy? It's pathetic. More laughter. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. But once I get my hands on her daddy's boats, I'll dump her faster than yesterday's catch. The old man's fleet is worth at least $4 million. And that waterfront property? Prime real estate. Victoria's already got developers lined up. Victoria. I knew that name. His ex-girlfriend. The one he claimed was ancient history. Another voice chimed in. What about the daughter? Think she'll figure it out? My son-in-law snorted. Please. She believes everything I tell her. I could sell her oceanfront property in Kansas and she'd write me a check. The beer bottles clinked again. Someone whistled low. Man, you're cold, but smart, real smart. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Every word replayed in my mind like a broken record. Plain Jane. Pathetic. Dump her faster than yesterday's catch? I found a bench near the water and sat down heavily, staring at the boats rocking gently in their slips. Those boats represented everything I had worked for since I was 24 years old. They represented my father's legacy, my wife's sacrifices, my family's entire future, and my daughter was about to hand it all over to a snake in a designer suit. I lit a cigarette with trembling hands and watched the smoke curl up into the evening sky. I had to tell her. I had to warn her before it was too late. When I returned to the party, I found my daughter near the buffet table, laughing at something one of her bridesmaids had said. I touched her elbow gently. Sweetheart, can I talk to you for a minute? Alone? She looked at me with those trusting eyes and nodded. We walked to the edge of the deck, away from the crowd. What is it, Dad? You look pale. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. There were none. I just heard something. About your fiancé. Something you need to know. Her smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? I was walking past the restrooms and I heard him talking to his friends. He said. I paused, the words tasting like poison. He said he's only marrying you for the boats, for the business. He called you a plain Jane and said he'd dump you as soon as he got what he wanted. The color drained from her face for just a moment. Then her expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. Dad, that's ridiculous. You must have misheard. I didn't mishear. He mentioned Victoria, said she's got developers lined up for the property. Victoria is his ex. They haven't spoken in years. Her voice was sharp now, defensive. Dad, I know you've never really liked Marcus, but making up stories is beneath you. I'm not making anything up. I know what I heard. You've been stressed since Mom died. Maybe you're projecting your fears onto... Don't you dare make this about your mother. My voice came out louder than I intended. A few guests turned to look. I lowered my voice. I am trying to protect you. Her eyes filled with tears, but not the kind I expected. These were angry tears. You've always tried to control everything, Dad. The business, the boats, my life. Maybe you just can't stand the idea of someone else being important to me. Before I could respond, her best friend appeared at her side. Megan, a real estate agent who had introduced my daughter to her fiancé in the first place. She placed a protective hand on my daughter's shoulder. Everything okay here? Fine, my daughter said, wiping her eyes. Dad was just leaving to get more ice. Megan looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. Suspicion? Warning? She guided my daughter back toward the party, whispering something in her ear. I stood alone at the railing, watching the last light fade from the sky. In the distance, my son-in-law emerged from the side of the building, smoothing his hair and straightening his tie. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a mock toast, that smug smile spreading across his face. He knew I had heard, and he knew my daughter would not believe me. The wedding took place 3 weeks later at the Ocean View Chapel, a white wooden church that overlooked the harbor. The pews were filled with friends, family, and business associates, all dressed in their finest. The flowers were perfect. The music was perfect. Everything was perfect, except the fact that my daughter was marrying a fraud. I sat in the front row, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. I watched her walk down the aisle, on the arm of her uncle, my brother, since she had told me she needed space after our conversation at the engagement party. Every step she took felt like a nail being driven into my heart. My son-in-law stood at the altar, looking like a catalog model, his groomsmen flanking him like soldiers. When my daughter reached him, he took her hands and looked into her eyes with an expression of such convincing love that I almost doubted myself. Almost. The ceremony proceeded. Vows were exchanged. Rings were placed on fingers. When the pastor asked if anyone had reason why these two should not be married, I opened my mouth. But before any sound came out, Megan caught my eye from across the aisle and shook her head slowly, deliberately. My daughter's shoulders tensed. I said nothing. The moment passed. You may kiss the bride. The chapel erupted in applause. I clapped mechanically, my hands moving while my mind screamed. My daughter turned, radiant, and for just a second, our eyes met. I saw something flicker there, uncertainty perhaps, or hope that I would still be happy for her. I tried to smile. It felt like a grimace. The reception was held at the harbor, on the same deck where the engagement party had taken place. The caterers had set up white tents and round tables with centerpieces of blue hydrangeas. The Atlantic Dreamer was decorated with streamers and a just married banner. I stayed on the periphery, nursing a whiskey and watching my son-in-law work the crowd. He shook hands with boat captains, charmed the older ladies, and posed for photographs with his arm wrapped possessively around my daughter. Several times, I noticed him in deep conversation with Megan, their heads close together. Around midnight, when most of the guests had left, my brother found me sitting alone on a bench near the water. "You okay, Harold?" I shook my head. "I heard him, Tom. Before the engagement party. He's after the business." Tom sat down beside me with a heavy sigh. "Look, I know you don't like the guy, but you have to let her live her own life. Even if that life is built on lies? You don't have proof of anything, just something you overheard. People say things they don't mean all the time." I looked at my brother, this man I had known my entire life, and saw the doubt in his eyes. He didn't believe me either. "Thanks for walking her down the aisle," I said flatly. "She looked beautiful." Tom patted my shoulder. "She did. Just give it time, Harold. Maybe you're wrong about him." But I wasn't wrong. And the weeks that followed proved it. The rumors started about 2 weeks after the wedding. I first noticed it at the fuel dock, where I had been filling up boats for decades. Old Pete, who ran the station, barely looked at me as he processed my card. "Everything okay, Pete?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Heard some things, Harold. About the engagement party." My stomach dropped. "What things?" "That you tried to break up your daughter's wedding, made up lies about her husband." He finally looked at me, disappointment clear on his weathered face. That's low, even for someone having a hard time letting go. I drove away with my fuel and my fury, wondering how long it would take for the whole town to turn against me. Not long, as it turned out. At the hardware store, conversations stopped when I walked in. At the diner where I had eaten breakfast for 30 years, my regular booth was suddenly reserved. Kids on the street would whisper and point. One afternoon, a group of teenagers walking past the marina started chanting "Jealous Jerry" for no reason. I could understand until I realized they had mixed up my name with the character in some television show about a controlling father. The worst was at church that Sunday. Pastor Williams, who had baptized my daughter, pulled me aside after the service. "Harold, I've heard some troubling things. People are saying you've been spreading lies about your son-in-law out of jealousy." "Pastor," I heard him with my own ears. "He's using my daughter." Pastor Williams sighed, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Grief does strange things to us. Losing your wife, watching your daughter start a new life, it can make us see threats where there are none. Maybe you should talk to someone." I pulled away from his touch. "I'm not crazy, and I'm not grieving myself into delusions." But as I walked to my truck, I heard the whispers following me like shadows. A month after the wedding, I received a call from my accountant. His voice was strained, careful. "Harold, we need to talk. Can you come by the office?" I found him sitting behind his desk, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Spreadsheets covered every surface. "What is it, Frank?" He slid a folder across the desk. "Your daughter and her husband were here last week. They had me draw up some paperwork, power of attorney, business transfer documents, loan applications." My blood went cold. "Show me." The documents were damning. My daughter had signed papers giving her husband full control over her portion of the family trust, which included 40% of the charter business. There were loan applications using the boats as collateral, property assessments for the waterfront acreage. She signed all of this? Frank nodded miserably. She seemed confused, honestly. He did most of the talking, kept saying it was for tax purposes, estate planning. She just signed where he pointed. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly the first few shots came out blurred. My daughter had inherited her share when her mother passed. It was supposed to be her security, her future, and she was signing it away to a man who called her a plain Jane. That night, I called an old friend from my Navy days. Gary had retired from the service and started a private investigation firm in Boston. I told him everything. "I need proof, Gary. Something that will hold up in court. This guy sounds like a real piece of work. I'll put my best man on it. But Harold, you need to prepare yourself. What we find might be worse than what you already know." He was right. 3 weeks later, Gary called me to his office. The building was nondescript, sandwiched between a law firm and a dental practice. Inside, Gary sat behind a metal desk, covered in folders and photographs. "Sit down, Harold. This is going to be hard to hear." He spread the photographs across the desk. My son-in-law at a restaurant in Portland, holding hands with a dark-haired woman. The same woman getting into his car. The same woman kissing him in a parking garage. Her name is Victoria Chen, real estate developer. They've been together for 6 years, never broke up. I stared at the photos, feeling sick. My daughter said they hadn't spoken in years. That's what she was told. We pulled phone records. They talk every day, sometimes for hours. Gary turned his laptop toward me and pressed play on an audio file. Victoria's voice came through the speakers first. "How much longer do I have to wait? This small-town charade is exhausting." Then my son-in-law. "Not long now. The old man's suspicious, but nobody believes him. Once I transfer the business assets and sell that waterfront property to your development company, we're looking at 8, maybe 10 million. Then I'll file for divorce, claim irreconcilable differences, and we're out." Victoria laughed. "And the wife? What about her? She'll get her fair share, whatever that means after I'm done restructuring. Maybe she can use it to buy a personality." More laughter. The sound of glasses clinking. Gary stopped the recording. "I'm sorry, Harold." I sat in silence for a long moment, processing. The evidence was clear, undeniable. My son-in-law was not just unfaithful, but actively conspiring to steal my family's entire legacy. "There's one more thing," Gary said. "We found something interesting about the husband's background. He has a sister, Linda, lives in New Hampshire. She's been trying to reach your daughter, but her calls keep getting blocked. She might be worth talking to." The drive to Nashua took 3 hours. Linda lived in a modest apartment complex near the river, a far cry from the luxury lifestyle her brother enjoyed. When I knocked on her door, a woman in her 40s answered. She had the same dark eyes as my son-in-law, but where his were calculating, hers were sad. "You're Harold," she said. "It was not a question. I've been waiting for someone to come." Her apartment was small but neat. She made coffee while I sat on her faded couch, looking at family photos on the wall. In one, I recognized my son-in-law as a teenager, standing next to Linda and an older couple. "Our parents," she explained, handing me a mug. "They passed away 5 years ago. Or rather, they died of broken hearts after Marcus destroyed them." She sat across from me and began to talk. The story was horrifyingly familiar. Marcus had convinced their father to invest his retirement savings in a can't-fail business venture. The business never existed. The money disappeared. Their father suffered a stroke when he discovered the truth. Their mother, already weakened by years of stress, followed him to the grave 6 months later. "I've tried to warn people," Linda said, tears streaming down her face. "Every woman he gets involved with, I try to reach them. But he's smart. He isolates them from anyone who might tell the truth. By the time they figure it out, he's already taken everything." "Will you testify?" I asked. "If this goes to court, will you tell the judge what you told me?" She hesitated for only a second. "Yes. I've wanted to stop him for years. I just never had anyone fighting alongside me." I drove back to Rockport with a new sense of purpose. I had the photographs. I had the recordings. I had a witness who knew exactly what kind of monster my son-in-law was. But I still needed to get through to my daughter. The opportunity came sooner than expected. I received a call from my son-in-law's phone, but it was my daughter's voice on the line, hushed and scared. "Dad, can you come over? Marcus is at a conference in Boston. I need to talk to you." I found her in the living room of the house Marcus had insisted they rent, a waterfront property that I now realized was owned by Victoria's development company. My daughter looked thin, tired. The light in her eyes had dimmed. "Sit down, sweetheart. Talk to me." She twisted her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit she had since childhood. "Things have been strange, Dad. Marcus is gone more than he's home. He gets these phone calls and walks away to take them. And I keep finding papers, business documents, things he says I don't need to worry about." I pulled out my phone. "I have to show you something. It's going to hurt, but you need to see it." I showed her the photographs first, watched the color drain from her face as she recognized Victoria, the woman Marcus had sworn was out of his life. Then I played the recordings. By the time Victoria's laugh echoed through the speakers, my daughter was sobbing. "He said the same things about our mother." I did not understand at first. Then I realized she was reading a text from Linda, whose number I had given her, his own sister. He destroyed his own parents. I held her while she cried, this grown woman who was still my little girl. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I wanted to be wrong. You tried to tell me, at the engagement party, and I didn't listen." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "What do I do now, Dad?" "We fight. We get back everything he tried to take from you. And we make sure he can never do this to anyone else." The legal proceedings took 4 months. My lawyer, a shark named Patricia who had handled my business contracts for years, guided us through the process. We filed for divorce on grounds of fraud. We pressed criminal charges for financial exploitation. We gathered witnesses, including 2 other women Marcus had victimized in the past. The trial took place in the county courthouse, a brick building that had stood for over 100 years. The courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the back row, having caught wind of the charter boat scandal, as the local papers called it. My son-in-law sat at the defendant's table in his expensive suit, looking smaller than I remembered. Gone was the confident smile, the easy charm. Victoria was notably absent. My daughter took the stand first. She spoke clearly, describing how Marcus had rushed their relationship, how he had insisted on handling all finances, how he had isolated her from friends and family who raised concerns. Several women in the gallery nodded, recognizing the pattern. Then Linda testified. She told the same story she had shared in her apartment, but now it was part of the official record. When she described finding her father collapsed on the kitchen floor, clutching the bank statement that showed his empty accounts, I heard gasps from the crowd. The recordings were played for the jury. My son-in-law objected, shouted that they were fabricated, tried to fire his lawyer mid-trial. The judge threatened him with contempt. Finally, it was my turn. I told my story simply, starting with that evening at the engagement party, the harbor, the sunset, the voices around the corner. Plain Jane, I repeated. That's what he called my daughter, the woman he claimed to love. He said she followed him around like a lost puppy, that she'd believe anything. I looked directly at my son-in-law, but she learned the truth. We all did. And now here we are. The verdict came back guilty, on all counts. Fraud, financial exploitation, conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. His assets were seized. Victoria's development company faced its own investigation and eventually went bankrupt. When the sentence was read, my son-in-law turned to look at me. His eyes were full of hatred, but also something else. Fear. For the first time, he was facing consequences for his actions. I watched as they led him away in handcuffs. No smug smile now, just a con man finally caught. Outside the courthouse, my daughter found me sitting on a bench overlooking the square. The autumn leaves were falling, orange and gold, carpeting the grass. Dad? I looked up. Hey, sweetheart. She sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. I'm sorry for not believing you, for pushing you away, for all of it. I put my arm around her. You don't have to apologize for trusting someone who lied to you. But you tried to warn me, and I called you controlling. I said terrible things. You're my daughter. There's nothing you could say that would make me stop loving you. She leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she used to when she was little, and the world seemed too big and scary. We sat there for a long time, watching people pass by, watching the leaves fall. The next few months were about rebuilding. My daughter moved back to Rockport, into the small cottage near the marina, where she had grown up. She started working with me again, learning the business she had nearly signed away. One spring morning, we took the Atlantic Dreamer out for the first charter of the season. The sky was clear, the water calm. A family of 4 from Connecticut had booked us for a day of fishing, and my daughter handled the booking, the bait prep, the customer service, all while I captained the boat. Around noon, with 3 striped bass already in the cooler, I found her standing at the bow, looking out at the horizon. You know what Mom used to say about this view? I asked. She smiled. That it reminded her why she married a fisherman instead of a banker. That's right. I stood beside her. She said the ocean was honest. It could be beautiful or dangerous, but it never lied about what it was. My daughter nodded slowly. I want to be like that. Honest, even when it's hard. I squeezed her shoulder. You already are, sweetheart. You already are. That evening, after the charter was done and the boat was cleaned, we sat on the deck of the waterfront property, the same deck where everything had started to unravel a year ago. The sunset painted the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink. I heard from Linda yesterday, my daughter said. She's doing well. Started a support group for victims of financial fraud. That's good. She's a strong woman. She said something that stuck with me. That the best revenge isn't seeing someone punished. It's building a life they can't touch. I thought about that. My son-in-law was in prison. Victoria was bankrupt. The people who had whispered about me in town now nodded respectfully when I passed. But none of that, compared to this moment, sitting with my daughter, watching the boats in the harbor. Your mother would be proud of you, I said. My daughter wiped a tear from her cheek. You think so? I know so. We sat there until the stars came out. 2 generations of the same family, anchored by the same water, looking toward the same future. The charter business was thriving. The waterfront property was safe. And my daughter was free, standing on her own 2 feet, stronger than she had ever been. I learned something important through all of this. Blind trust can be dangerous, but giving up on the people you love is worse. A father's job is not to control his children's lives, but to be there when they need him, even when they don't know they need him yet. My son-in-law thought he could manipulate my daughter because he saw kindness as weakness. He was wrong. Her kindness, her willingness to believe the best in people, those were not flaws to exploit. They were strengths that deserved protection. The truth always finds its way to the surface, like the tide. Sometimes it takes longer than we want. Sometimes it hurts more than we expect. But it always comes. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. May God bless you and your families. May you never face the betrayal we faced, but if you do, may you find the courage to fight for what's yours. And remember, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. A big hug from the harbor. This is Feathered Vengeance, signing off.